Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today we are bringing you an audio compilation of some videos and interviews that Eric Helms recorded about 6 months ago in his Anecdotes and Observations YouTube series. We will start off with a conversation about motivation and adherence featuring Omar Isuf, who is one of the OG fitness YouTube personalities and has continued to crush it over the last decade with his witty, entertaining, and extremely practical videos for those interested in the iron game for the long haul. Secondly, Eric will chat with Jacob Schepis of JPS Health and Fitness about success as a trainer. Jacob is a gym owner, in-person PT, online coach, bodybuilder, powerlifter, and conference host who brings some of the best people and information on the planet together for his attendees year after year. Then lastly, you'll get to hear a conversation with Eric Helms and Mike Israetel about individualizing your training volume based on a number of his methods and landmarks that are practiced within his extremely successful coaching company, Renaissance Periodization. I want to go ahead and get into the recordings because Eric does his own little mini intro for each of these three conversations with his colleagues, so there's kind of no point in me continuing to ramble about them here. They're all great, I promise. So please enjoy Anecdotes and Observations compilation number 2 with Omar Isuf, Jacob Schepis, and Mike Israetel.
What's going on, 3DMJers? I've got an exciting announcement for the way that the AO series is going. By the way, that's pronounced AO. I know you guys love that, and by love that I mean you hate it, but I'm not going to stop, so just suck it up. Is that we're going to be interviewing more people. So as you noticed, the last couple of episodes, I had the opportunity to discuss things about training and nutrition with Brian Miner and also Dr. Joe Klimczewski. And I think it's really cool to bring in anecdotes and observations that are outside of my experience, so I can see how other trainers have found ways to get their clients the best results possible. And it's a really good adjunct to the science-based information, which kind of creates that basis for where you start. But then really the way you engage with athletes or clients or help them is by observing what happens over time. And sometimes commonalities happen across a large spectrum of people. And those are probably some pretty high quality anecdotes. So for the month of June, I've been traveling. Right now I'm currently in Toronto working with Omar Isuf for a Kaizen project. And next week I will be in Calgary for IPF Worlds and supporting Bryce and meeting up with a lot of my fellow friends and coaches in the powerlifting world. And then after that, I'll be coming back towards New Zealand where I live, going to Melbourne to do the Ultimate Evidence-Based Conference with a ton of the top content producers in kind of our little evidence-based corner of the fitness world. So I'm going to have the opportunity to talk to a lot of people. So what I want to do is put out a more frequent episode of AO where I sit down and discuss some of the observations that have been critical to each one of these different trainers' success. So I hope you enjoy this first one with Omar Isuf, and I'll see you next time.
What's going on, 3DMJers? I am here with Omar Isuf, the man himself. We're back with another episode of Anecdotes and Observations, where we talk about things we've perceived in the trenches and what we've learned as trainers over time. So that's AO, pronounced
Ayo. It was all right. I was going more for a Rocky, like, Ayo.
Okay.
Like, come on, Ayo, Rocky.
All right.
No,
it was good.
that's like an encouraging drama teacher where the kid tanked the fucking impression, and you're just like, you know what? Like, yeah, no, keep working on it. Your timing was off. You didn't remember your words, and you weren't looking at the camera. But
what you did say are the two letters
AO. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So we'll just move past that start.
Travesty.
So Omar, how long have you been a trainer?
I've been a trainer now for probably 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So you transitioned from being an in-person personal trainer to now being more of a content creator?
Yes.
But you still do some coaching?
Yeah, I do some coaching. I don't charge any people that I coach now because you reach the point, I think, if you really like something, you'll do it just because you like doing it. And so there's people, I go to Fortis Fitness, and some people need some help, and so I still coach them. I would say 90% of my stuff is now just all online, and then, you know, on occasion, people that want to like compete or whatnot, help them out.
Yeah, so you produce content through Kaizen on your YouTube channel, and then just because, to keep the skill because you love it, you work with some people for just in person for free, or program for them at least.
Yeah, and I think you just nailed something, Eric. Something that maybe some people don't realize that want to produce content is, I think you need to still be practicing.
Yeah, it's a skill.
Yeah, and then to like just even observe how someone's lifting when it comes to technique, all those things.
Yeah.
Coaching is a skill that needs to be practiced.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're probably in the hashtag science crew.
Hashtag
as we'd
science.
say, right? You've had myself, like Mike Israetel, Brett Schoenfeld, Alan Aragon.
Yeah.
Either indirectly helping you with content on your channel or actually on, which is always really cool.
Yeah.
But we know there are limits to what science can help us with. So if you think about things you've noticed through your training career as a personal trainer, what have you observed that may or may not actually be in line with the science, but is something that you found consistently useful in the way you work with people that's not necessarily science-based, as far as like you couldn't find a PubMed abstract for it?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting that you say that. I would want to talk a little bit about the psychology of a lifter, where there is research when it comes to sports performance, but just the individual makeup of a person, why they lift, and making it into lifestyle, all those factors, I think it's specific and dependent upon that individual.
Right.
There are certain things where, someone might come to you, and especially as a trainer, I think lifting is an emotional response, why someone might seek out a coach because they want to improve. Like, I want to get stronger. Well, what does getting stronger do for you? Or I want to lose weight. Like, when I was a trainer, most people that had that level of disposable income to afford a trainer would be probably in their late 30s, 40s, 50s. Probably the split was 60-40 women to men.
Yep.
And they had a variety of different reasons. But their initial reason, they might come into lifting thinking one thing, but my goal being their trainer was to make them kind of flip it around and look at it more like a lifestyle.
Right.
Where they might want to only lose 5 pounds, but guess what? I'll make you lose those 5 pounds. You'll feel good, and then you'll fall off, and then you'll gain the weight back. So it'll just be this endless cycle. And so for me, really going into why they lift would inform everything else, because then that would inform their adherence to the program, if they're even going to want to follow, the buy-in to me as a coach, if they're going to trust me, if they're going to think, I need to follow him, like he says, work out 4 times a week, I'll do it because this aligns with the goals I have for myself.
Yep.
And so the whole reason why, getting to know someone, I think, and that's why when we say a personal trainer, I'm not talking about a rent-a-friend, where some people, you can inevitably fall into that trap,
Yep.
when some people kind of come to you a little broken, where they're seeking something,
Yep.
and so you could take on that role. I think that establishing a rapport, an understanding of that person, so just the interaction, that personal relationship, and then finding what would work best for them. There is definitely some evidence behind that of sports performance and all those things, but I think it's a skill set that in person you have to cultivate.
So to paraphrase, to me it sounds like you're saying, hey, you're coming to me with this goal, but in reality what you need is a lifestyle change. And that's not going to happen unless I can facilitate your own understanding, your own motivation. So it's about helping someone look a little bit deeper and figure out why they actually came into the gym in the first place. And then, because as we know, most people just don't last in fitness.
No, and I think even, Eric, I could be wrong with this statistic. I think it's a Canadian one, and especially they use it to promote some courses, but I think they did a study in Canada where they found that on average, a personal trainer themselves only lasts 3 years in the industry, right? It's a very high turnover. And so the clients also have a very high turnover, but that's because I think partially it's the way it's marketed. I think also lifting in general is viewed kind of as a weird niche, like when you lift with free weights or when you just go to the gym, it's something where, I want to lose weight, rather than it's like, this is kind of a lifestyle. It's like, as humans, I don't want to say we're built to move, but we're used to moving, right? And so we're more sedentary now than we've ever been. So it's something that really should be natural for us. And so removing kind of maybe even some of those reservations where for some people, if they want to do free weights, especially some women I tend to notice, where they might have some reservations. I don't want to get too bulky. This is intimidating. I don't know anything about this, because it's not been ingrained in our culture. All you see when you see advertisements, you'll see someone doing, light tricep kickbacks. A woman's like, oh, you want to get sculpted? And like the underlying message is like, you want your husband to love you more. Like, this is what you should be doing. This is what you need to do in order to look attractive, right? So going over all those barriers that as a society we create, as an individual we create, and then letting them take maybe more ownership of themselves and their destiny, what they can do within their ability, ultimately can be empowering to them, and then they'll stick with it. And so the best clients are the clients that were able to make lasting transformations. It's getting down to that reason. And it took me a while, obviously. Like, when I first did it, I'm like, all right, I'm going to give you like a really effective program, diet help, got it. Like, let's focus really on that. But then I would notice I would help someone change and help someone make a transformation. But then, maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year, if it's not that lifestyle, they'll kind of fall right back into their comfortable pattern.
Yeah, I think it's great that there's been a much larger focus of trainers on like science, and I do think that results are motivating. And using an evidence-based approach will likely get you faster results.
Absolutely.
Which will likely motivate you to say, hey, this is working, and stick with it. But I do think long-term adherence is going to come down completely to someone understanding why they're doing what they're doing, and who they want to be, and how that integrates with what they're doing with the trainer.
Sure.
So I totally agree. Like if I was to give you my top 3 things or qualities of a personal trainer or goals of what to focus on with a client, being perfectly evidence-based probably wouldn't reach the top 3. Probably in the top 10 or top 5. It's up there, but I think just that people truly understand how much, like how high the recidivism is, sticking with training. And then once you realize that's the biggest barrier to someone staying fit. That has to be probably the majority of your focus as a trainer if you want to be effective in terms of real lasting change.
And I think as a trainer too, like we derive satisfaction from seeing clients succeed, and so I want to see them succeed. And so, as you said, when people kind of would fall back off or they lose motivation, I want to know why, right? I wanted to figure out why that was. And so I think what's interesting is, as you said, we kind of make it maybe more of a lifestyle or frame it in a way that it makes more sense for them. But then also another thing that I found was interesting is if they have a family, then making a more collective approach then where, if you're a woman, if you're a guy and your significant other is still sedentary, not doing anything, it's like that's once again something that's likely to happen. So all those factors come together. But then when it works really well, then it can be very satisfying. And then they make consistent, lasting changes. And I've seen clients now years after that they've kept. I remember there's this one banker guy he's just tired basically being fat. It's like that dude lost 50 pounds and he's kept those 50 pounds off since probably now like 7 years on,
Because you took a very holistic approach to each aspect of his life.
And then he took what's I think a trap that some trainers make is that they try and make the client dependent upon them. So it's like almost a parasitic relationship. Like, I'll give you the training, I'll give you the nutrition, but I am the one giving you this. You need me.
It comes from on high. Down into to my people.
The match. It's like, no, I want to explain what this is, the training methodology, the nutrition. I want to empower you so you could take control of your own life. And then eventually it's like, you don't need a trainer. It's like, you know what to do. If you need the accountability, and I get it, like you're going to be coaching me when it comes time for me to get lean. But you still have the tools within yourself to keep that change.
I mean, if you look at models of behavior change and what motivates humans and what makes us happy, competence and autonomy are always up there. And having a sense of belonging and community is also important. And I think that's what the trainer should focus on and not actually bring down the competence and autonomy. Like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm the expert. Like, I think your relationship should evolve. They're not going to know what they're doing at first if they've never been familiar with it.
Sure.
But you should be mentoring them, not just coaching them. Or not just training them, I should say.
We're going to start a cult, bro.
Yes.
The cult of lifting.
So check in here at 3DMJ next time when we start our cult.
The cult of personality, bro. Can I say AO one more time?
Let's try it again.
AO! No?
That was great.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, I believed it.
Welcome back to AO, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. 3DMJ prides itself on keeping this show, our blog, and our YouTube channel as free and relevant sources of information for our community week after week. We also release additional free video courses as often as possible at 3dmjvault.com. If you'd like to help support our mission and our work, please consider becoming a monthly patron of our endeavors. Go to patreon.com/team3dmj and donate a couple dollars per month to our cause of helping educate and grow the drug-free bodybuilding and powerlifting communities worldwide. You can definitely choose to donate more, and if you do so, we'll send you a discount code for future use on any of our paid products, but any little bit helps, and we appreciate your monthly support in any amount that you see fit. So again, you can start assisting the team at patreon.com/team3dmj. That's patreon.com/team3dmj. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the show.
What's going on, 3DMJers? This is Eric Helms. I'm at the JPS Fitness hosted Ultimate Evidence-Based Conference, and this is the, I think, episode 8 of Anecdotes and Observations. That's AO pronounced AO. I think he did a lot better than Omar Isuf, that's for sure.
Got one on you, Omar.
So if you don't know who Jacob Schepis is, he is a gym owner here in Melbourne. He is making a lot of fantastic content online. He's got a lot of practical experience. How long have you been coaching?
Since I was 19, so...
Like a year?
Yeah, a year. I'm only 18, so...
That's right.
Almost 8 years now.
That's awesome. And how long have you owned JPS Fitness?
Since I started, the company was developed.
Yeah.
But I had a personal training background at a commercial gym first, so I was there for 2 years. So when I was 21, so 6 years now, I've had a facility where I coach and have other coaches train people, yeah.
And you're an athlete yourself?
I try to be. Mediocre athlete, hopefully better coach. A little bit of powerlifting, bodybuilding first.
Right.
It's my one true love, and then obviously the powerlifting was an extension of that.
Sure.
In the off season, yeah.
And you've had a podcast now where I've really enjoyed having discussions with you and the various other experts you have on. And one thing I think is really impressive about you is that you've very much embraced evidence-based practice in a holistic way, including all three sides of it. That's your own experience, the personal preference of the client, as well as the science. We're going to be specifically talking about some of the more anecdotal knowledge, the stuff that's not coming from PubMed. So if you have found something in your practice that is consistently effective, that is not necessarily supported by literature or just really can't be supported by literature, what I would like to hear is what is that and how much has it impacted your practice? And if you could share that with the listeners and see if they can glean any information from it that'll help them.
Yeah, awesome. I think to start, I came into the industry very much unaware of how multifaceted and just how much information and knowledge you need as a coach to be able to get effective results with your clients. And I was quite dogmatic at the start, knew very little. It was, clean eating, train to failure every set. But I soon fell into science. And I think one of the mistakes I made in falling into the science was trying to be a scientist.
Sure.
And reading research and being able to cite various papers and textbooks, and it really didn't help my practice at all initially, because at the end of the day we're working with a single client and n equals 1. So to start, the most effective thing I do now as a coach is learn how to screen my clients before I start working with them.
Okay.
And the interpersonal skills that you need to be able to communicate with them, to be able to get the information that you need to then use the science as a starting point. So I think, coaches who are in the evidence-based practice, field or community, look to the science. And yes, they look to their experience, but they often forget the client side of things and don't properly understand just how beneficial it is to be able to use, verbal and non-verbal communication to understand somebody's values,
right,
their beliefs, their attitudes, because we know how much of a role that plays in behavior, which influences, their goal attainment. So I think starting there and being able to screen your clients, not just on a physical level, such as like using an overhead squat or, joint isolated screening assessments, but to, assess them as a person, all those things related to them psychologically, as well as, their confidence in the gym, whether or not they have the knowledge to be able to track calories and macros. So we have screening tools now that we use at JPS where we assess somebody's education. So their training IQ. Do you know what reps and sets means? Do you know what RP is? Like asking basic questions like this can help you better understand the client, where they are, and how best to apply what we know through science. And that's been a huge game changer for me over the years, is focusing less on how much can I learn from science and more on how much can I learn about this client. And that's been extremely valuable. And then stemming from that, once you have that base of understanding of the person you're working with, having models or systems to teach nutrition and teach training. I think, as we know, success is very much, correlated with self-determination theory. So how competent someone can be, their self-efficacy and, their autonomy.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be able to teach people the skills and the knowledge necessary so that they can, assume control over their training, their diet, to be able to achieve their goals. And I very much see a lot of utility in having systems to do that, because although we want to treat the individuals as individuals, we do need a model of teaching that we can apply in a very time-efficient manner, because as personal trainers, if we're on the gym floor, we're working online, time is of the essence, and we need to have the streamlined process to be able to do that. Some of the systems that I guess I've created have been very much based on, my experience in working with other coaches, seeing what they do, so they're not mine, entirely, such as your, system for teaching a flexible diet. That 4-phase approach, to incrementally implement a flexible approach to nutrition. But having templates is a huge way that you can do that.
Right.
So we have templates that are modified based on somebody's level of advancement with their training and their diet. So we have beginner templates where they learn what foods have what macros.
Right.
There's no talk about, you need to eat X amount of grams of protein per day, you need to hit your fiber. It's just, these are proteins, these are carbs, these are fats, have 3 to 5 meals based on your preference, and we obviously adjust that. When you like to eat, we work around those confines. And then we have an intermediate template where it's like, cool, now we're going to assess your body weight once a week. You're going to start checking in. You're going to start tracking your calories and your protein. Then we have our advanced template where clients are tracking their weight daily. They're tracking their steps. So there's this incremental increase in the complexity at which we apply nutrition. And we have the same for training. So with our beginners, we don't talk about RPE.
Right.
We get them on a program. It's like, cool, this is the exercise. Do you know how to perform this correctly? Do you have good technique? Can you understand rest, sets, repetitions, load, tempo, these kind of things, and just be able to consistently train.
Yeah.
And then once they can prove to me after a period of, 4 to 8 weeks that they've followed the program and they've ticked off all their sessions and they've filled it out, it's like, cool, you're ready for the next template, which is now we're going to track your reps, sets, and loads for every set. And we're going to start using RPE scale.
Sure.
And then obviously the advanced template, we start measuring things like number of working sets per week. We look at things like volume load, intensity. We start assessing with a little more of a critical eye what's happening. So I think that has been highly useful in my ability to coach. And it's been really effective because no longer am I using this one template and having to sort of say, oh, well, don't worry about RPE, we'll get to that later, and confusing people.
Yeah.
It's been able to streamline things really well. And I guess when it comes to the nutrition side of things, something that I've used, and I spoke to you a little bit about this, and also with Dr. Mike Israetel, is the application of reverse dieting outside of contest prep. I've seen this work extremely well. A little bit unconventional. I sort of stumbled upon it just with my clients who were coming out of a deficit, and I didn't really know what to do with them. It's like, oh, we'll bring you to maintenance, but it's like the light would switch off, and everybody struggles with maintaining weight, and gaining weight for most people is even more difficult to do so at the right rate. So what I've used with reverse dieting is when people go into a fat loss phase, it might be 12 weeks. The first 6 to 8 weeks, it's a pretty aggressive diet. You get the motivation from the consistent results. You get the buy-in because they trust you, and then start to increase their calories so that when they come out of it, not only are they less likely to binge because energy availability starts increasing, the size of the deficit gets smaller, but they look better, they start training better, and it teaches them the importance of eating various calorie intakes, as opposed to what many people perceive to be dieting. It's like, well, I have to have that one.
Just drop it right down.
Just drop it right down and keep dropping it. It teaches variation in calorie intake, which I think is extremely important, and they're beneficial for subsequent phases where they have to either maintain their new weight, gain weight, and so forth. So that'll be something that I've used on the nutrition side of things pretty effectively. When it comes to training, obviously, I listen to a lot of what you and various other people in the field talk about, such as Greg Knuckles and guys like that. But I don't really apply daily undulating periodization to my physique athletes. I much prefer the Hatfield method, whereby in a single session somebody might work within a range of 6 to 20 reps. And it flows. I think there's something to be said for a session just flowing. When you do some heavy work at the start and then you start working up to those higher rep ranges, it feels really good. And it allows me to transition, especially those bros who come from a place of just training with really high reps. I can teach them how to train at lower repetitions within a session, but not do such little volume that they feel it's pointless. So I find that that's a really good tool to teach people how to work with various rep and loading zones. And obviously that's another discussion, in talking about hypertrophy of different fiber types. I know that you and Brian Miner have spoken about that quite a bit. We're still pretty unsure as to where we're going with that, I think, at this stage.
But I think even with if you leave fiber types alone, there's a lot of value in simply matching up specific exercises to certain rep ranges.
100%. The self-selecting.
Yeah, if anyone's been in
Eric
the
Helms.
gym, that's right. If anyone's been in the gym for more than 6 months, they know that your 20 rep sets don't match well with RDLs or squats. But on something like a leg extension or a leg press, that might have a good place. And there's the research we have now backs up that anecdotal kind of model that you have, if it just kind of flows nicely, is that it doesn't really matter how you create the variation in your hypertrophy phase, so long as it has some kind of logical order. You can do it across the week, you can do it week to week, or you can even do it within session. So I think that doesn't surprise me at all. That's something I think a lot of bodybuilders have found that. And
just an extension of that is with my physique athletes now, and it's been quite successful, even with my own training, is just setting up a microcycle, ticking the boxes of volume, intensity, frequency, and then having a progression model, which is dependent on the exercise. And I actually created my own little system with my athletes, unless someone else has used it and I just haven't forgotten that I stole it and I'm claiming it. But basically I have like a lighting system. So green means add weight, orange means add a set. So green equals add reps or load, orange equals add a set, and red equals use the same weight and reps and sets as you did last week, or decrease the reps and sets. So basically, when I build in progression to my clients' programs, they have the ability to say, hey, this was really, really easy this week. This is for more beginners and intermediates. This is really, really easy. Green light for this. Let's add reps or load. Right. And then orange, cool. Maybe I couldn't add another rep or can't add weight, but I'll get another set in. And it's just a basic way to teach them, hey, we need to progress, and sometimes we can't progress. So that's something I've used that seems to be working quite well. But outside of that, I really don't use deloads anymore to the same degree that I used to. Like I used to plan them in and say, hey, you've got a deload. But I've realized through working with a lot of people that most often they don't need a deload. You can auto-regulate by dropping fatigue in a couple of sessions, and then they can continue training. It's obviously dependent on the context. Like if you've got a contest prep athlete, they're planned in. Powerlifters, they're planned in. But I think for a lot of just general lifters who are training 3 to 4 times a week, they're almost resting more than they're training. So I think
if anything, it's like a reactive regression for a single day or something.
Yes, correct. As opposed to having a complete deload when they're going to go on holidays in a week's time, or they're traveling for work and they're going to miss a week of training. So I think that's been something that I've used with some level of success. But apart from that, I think the biggest thing that I've realized over years in working with people is that it doesn't need to be as complicated as what we think.
Absolutely.
And the more attention we pay to the client and their response to things, the better results we can get. And science is more often just that starting point to help us, get things going. And then we do really need to look at what's happening in real time. So they've been the things that I guess I've used effectively with my clients.
Well said. So there's a lot to unpack there, and if I was to summarize and just slap me around and change what I'm saying if I get it wrong. The initial assessment is incredibly important, more so than just like the PAR-Q health assessment and postural assessment that most personal trainers think of, because trainers often hang out with trainers. Like here at the UEBC conference, the entire room raised their hand when we asked who's a trainer or who wants to be or who's working with someone. And I think a lot of the times trainers congregate together and they produce content and systems and share information that is relevant to other trainers. And sometimes they forget how siloed they become away from the general population. And they assume a certain level of knowledge, experience, or understanding that most clients actually simply don't have.
We forget what it's like to be beginner.
The average client doesn't know what a calorie or protein or carbohydrate is. And they don't know what sets and reps even are. And they don't know how to properly perform an exercise. So I think making sure that your clients are at the appropriate level of knowledge is incredibly important. And then once you're actually working with them, having systems is incredibly important because you will end up creating a system for each individual client, but if you're starting from nothing, that can be a very inefficient process.
It's very difficult to have any means of progression. You have no direction. If you have some basic systems, I think it gives you a logical framework to progress someone.
Yep.
And I think if progression is the end goal, that's always a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then for some specific nutrition and training takeaways, it sounds like on the training side, for more Gen Pop or someone with general hypertrophy goals, not a competitive bodybuilder in the midst of prep or a powerlifter, having just reactive, easy days can be a very useful strategy so you don't have to take a full plan deload. Yep. And on the nutrition side, it's actually something I've also done, is that in the off season when someone's trying to gain muscle mass, especially when they're a natural bodybuilder who's pretty advanced, it's going to happen so slow anyway that I focus much more on this incremental increase in calories. And I think that's a great application of it when someone's doing a cut outside of contest prep, because they're not getting incredibly lean. There's no reason you need to add body fat or jump them up to a high calorie intake to deal with diet fatigue. So that sounds like a really excellent application of a tool.
Awesome.
Well, that's all we have for this episode of AO, folks. That's Jacob Schepis. Definitely check him out. We'll have some links in the in the comment section of this video, because this is not an Instagram video. Obviously, it's really long. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Honored to be on.
We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Really quick favor, guys. If you enjoy these shows and have been a listener for quite some time, we would really, really, really appreciate it if you could take the time to give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your preferred podcast app may be. Having lots of ratings and audience feedback makes our show become more visible across multiple platforms, and it supports our mission of helping as many people as we can to be the best athletes, coaches, and lifting enthusiasts that they could possibly be. So if you're not driving and wouldn't be dangerous, pause this thing right now and give us an honest review over on your podcast app, and we would love you even more than we already do. Thanks for taking the time, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hey 3DMJers, welcome back to Anecdotes and Observations. I'm here with Mike Israetel, and he's going to join us on AO today, pronounced
AO today. Was I supposed to say that today?
Yes. Yes, you were. And I have the fortune of being here at the Ultimate Evidence-Based Conference in Melbourne. We've had a lot of time to pick each other's brains and noses.
Yes.
And we've had a lot of fun kind of theorizing, scheming on Greg Knuckles and doing other things together.
It's gonna take the two of us plus Krieger probably to take Greg Knuckles down. Who knows?
Or just Krieger.
True. Just get out of my way.
Yeah, he's like, I got this.
That's right.
Anyway, so what I wanted to talk to you about today, Mike, is just to ask you, because I know you're a pretty heavy science guy, but also you do a lot of application, is just some anecdote or observation that you've seen that is a reliably useful anecdote that you've used that you want to share with all them Team 3DMJers out in the YouTube lands.
Not near YouTube. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure.
All right. So, it's been my whole volume landmarks business. So we've defined sort of how you reach your maximum recoverable volume is when you physically can't recover anymore to produce as much like rep strength the next week. This is exclusively for hypertrophy for this discussion.
So MRV is defined by the point at which strength cannot recover to previous levels.
Correct. So
week.
like let's say last week you did 225 for like sets of 10 in the bench, and then we're all like pretty close grinders. If you do 230 the next week and you get like 8, 6, 1, 1, 1, like you not clearly, but probably exceeded how much volume you could recover from in that time frame.
Or at least training stress.
Totally. And then, so like, but if you repeat that several mesocycles in a row, and every time you get to around 20-ish or 22 or 24 sets, you hit the wall again, like there's probably a wall there. There's just too much volume for you to chronically handle under good recoverable average conditions. Like, and sometimes you 18 sets because, you had like divorce in the middle of the shit, or sometimes it's 24 because you married in the middle of shit, but it's somewhere in there, and of course it's all the range, it's not one number, right?
Right.
So for that reason, MRV is like pretty straightforward to figure out, because you're like, well shit, but there's a ceiling. If you hit it and you're done. Performance is easy to measure. We all write down our reps, like we all, on a final week of an accumulation phase, tend to train pretty hard, so we know like we didn't just leave a shitload in the tank by accident. So in that way, sort of finding MRV and measuring it real world and updating it seems to be relatively easy.
Okay.
Minimum effective volume requires an assessment of, am I getting anything out of this training as far as any muscle growth north of maintenance?
Right.
Is there any kind of long-term muscle growth happening? That's a lot harder to figure out. The way to figure that out is through multiple phases of seeing if your rep strength improves from one cycle to another cycle. But you've got to do like 3 or 4 phases back to back to back of incrementally lower volumes to see where your floor is. And the first time you actually get weaker or just maintain, like if you do sets of 10 with a certain thing in the squat, and then a month later you're doing sets of 10 with the exact same thing, then clearly there was no effect because your rep strength didn't improve.
So
the rep
somewhere
strength as a
between
proxy
those
for
two
muscle
numbers.
size. Exactly. So like that's your area. But that takes a while. So, and when you insert exercises every couple of mesocycles, you put in new ones, you maybe don't have time to find the individual exercise minimum effective volume. So we have a proxy at RP we have RP Plus, like a members thing where James and I answer questions. We kind of have a proxy system for how do you know if maybe you're at minimum effective volume or above for hypertrophy, not for strength. For strength to be different.
Right.
So here it is. Here's our guess. So I'll list 3 things and I kind of describe them. Number 1, did the workout make you sore?
Okay.
Number 2, did you get a pump at all? Number 3, was the workout at all challenging in any way? If you could say subjectively, like it was in an RPE 7 or above.
Sure.
As a workout, which is tough to gauge.
So the sessional RPE.
The session. And if you really think about it, if you want to express your volumes per week, you look back at the whole first week of your training block and think back chest. On average, was I like pretty well fucked by it? Or was I just like could have done double the work and not even noticed, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If you did or didn't get sore by itself tells you dick. I mean, you could be over your MRV and never get sore. Yeah. And if you get pretty well sore, you could just be, something even at maintenance volume might make you sore, right? You can get sore from one set of RDLs, whatever, but that's probably not enough to grow you. It's just shock damage. So,
can I ask you a question? So, I know I'm thinking this, I know probably some listeners are probably thinking any one of these alone probably doesn't tell me anything, or all the times where this wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming you mean that if I have fixed all other program variables and the only thing I'm adjusting is the volume, same rep ranges, exercises, all that stuff.
Yes.
Then these become very useful factors.
Or even new exercises. So for example, you get a new set of exercises together and you kind of don't know where to start with them. So you start them somewhere at some random volumes. If an exercise or like a week of training for a body part, all the exercises used for it, let's say you have a couple new ones in there, if you just didn't get sore at all, you got no pump, like literally, you ever been in the gym trained like so little, and like maybe there's not enough time to train, you got 0 pump and you had to leave, and people were like, how was your workout? You're like, it wasn't really a workout.
It's called contest prep.
That's right. Hey, you think you're growing during that time? No, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So no soreness at all, no pump at all, and it felt super fucking easy. If you can say that about your training week for a body part, you're probably not doing enough to grow. Right. And the thing is, I hope to God I'm wrong, because wouldn't it be sweet if you could grow and get none of those? I would only train like that for forever.
Just do 1 set of 5 to 75%.
That's it. Yep. That's probably too little.
Yeah.
If a couple of them are there, maybe it's above minimum effective volume, maybe not. If all 3 of them are there, then you're for sure above minimum effective volume in most cases. If you're getting sore, if you're getting a pump, and if it's fucking pretty hard, you're probably doing a pretty fucking good job, and you're probably growing some muscle. Sure. Now, is it maximum muscle? No. But then you can start sort of there and go up. Another way we use it, so we use it to say, okay, are you for sure at least as high as minimum effective volume? If you're hitting none of those, Like someone will be like, I don't know if I'm above MEV for like my quad training. We're like, how was your quad training? Did you get sore? Did you get a pump? Was it hard? They're like, no. They're like, you probably need to do more, right?
Right.
On the other hand, some people are like, hey, first week, I couldn't walk. The pump was so bad I couldn't bend my legs, and it was a religious effort to get the sets done. We're like, you're like at your MRV week 1.
Yeah.
Where are you going to progress to? So basically, we instruct people, ideally, on average, like super just rough, if you have to start anywhere, tracking your own previous performance is best, but things change. A very tiny level of soreness, or not at all, to start with a mesocycle.
Right.
It might increase as you increase volume. Minimum to small amount of soreness. A little bitty pump. Nothing fucking, like if you're for week 1 and you're like, fuck, like, what are you going to do in week 3? Like, you're just going to blow up or something? Which would be kind of sweet. Overcooked hot dog muscle. Getting a little bit sore, a little bitty pump, and feeling a swag a little bit. You're like, all right, workout, I see you, but it's not a big deal. Then in the next week, it's going to be harder and harder and harder until you deload, and it's going to, week 4 or 3 or whatever, however long your accumulation is, religious effort, and you're done. And then you recycle, repeat.
Right.
So it's basically like, if you hit those, just barely nick every one, you're probably around the general minimum effective volume.
Right.
And you'll notice that as you get more trained over the years, those things are harder to do.
Yeah.
And that reflects the reality that minimum effective volumes rise over time.
Yep.
So if you're a really good bodybuilder, not everything one set of RDLs doesn't get you sore anymore.
Yep.
Like, no matter what, you have to take weeks off. And then it is your minimum effective volume because you're rebuilding lost muscle, right?
Right.
So you're not just going to get sore from everything. You don't just get pumped unless you really have a good workout, and maybe when you're hypercaloric, right?
Yeah.
Some people say, how do you know, at least in part, if you're gaining muscle on a contest prep or a diet, or if you're the kind of advanced individual or shitty genetics or whatever combination of those, that you're either losing muscle or for sure not gaining? Like, are you getting sore? Are you getting pumps? And are the workouts feeling like super productive? Because on a contest prep, for goddamn sure, none of those really happening. You might get sore, but it's not like like the super pump DOMs, like day later, like, oh shit. It's the kind of like joint/connective tissue soreness where you're like, just kill me. It's like a degrading sort of. So it's one of those things where, if you're not getting those gnarly pumps, you'd be like, well, I never get them on contest prep. Like, do you think you're growing on contest prep? It's like, no, you're right, probably not.
Yeah.
So, and of course, there's a direct self-swelling effect of hypertrophy too, so these aren't by accident, right? And I mean, for sure want to be careful with the DOMS part, because DOMS is not exactly a one-to-one relationship to hypertrophy.
No, it's also based on perception too.
Totally. And I would say that there's probably the last week of training may be a time to get crazy DOMs. I think at every other time it interferes with what you're going to do next week at the very least, and it's probably from a variety of studies, like too much damage, not enough resources for growth. Your body's just busy fixing itself. So I think, but I also think that if you fear DOMs, like we were talking about earlier, and you never get DOMs, you might never train hard enough to do anything. You'd be like, here's your effective volume range, here's where you start to get DOMs. You'll just never get into it. Right?
I do think a lot of that also comes down to the way, your training history and the way you've done things. We've talked a lot about frequency here at UEBC, and we kind of came to the conclusion with James's amazing presentation that almost any frequency can work so long as the volume is appropriate and appropriately distributed. And I would suspect that someone who has been using a higher frequency approach, say 3 or 4 times per week per muscle group, they're probably on average going to get less DOMs, even if you have the same volume.
Yes. What I would say to that is they might get a little bit of DOMs one day, a little bit of DOMs another day, a little bit of DOMs another day. But if you summate those, it might be the same amount of DOMs someone gets for the day after their full body training. It might not summate to that much.
Well, even if it
but
does,
they might get more pumps.
Okay.
They might have more total exertion of effort. Like, it might be technically harder to show up to the gym that many times and do 5 sets than it would just be get it all done at one time. But maybe those factors can overcompensate and have the same result in growth.
I think you're right. I think the issue then just comes down to, if you were someone who is taking that approach and you're getting a very small amount of perceived soreness after each workout, it may be below your perceptive ability to get the granularity to actually assess it.
Sure.
So I think what I would recommend to anyone listening is really try to keep a lot of variables static when you are trying to assess these things, or it's going to be very difficult to really get that subjective gauge.
100%, 100%. But the good thing is there's a couple of variables, right?
Right.
And it's one of those, like, we once someone presents us a sort of mixed factor analysis, they're like, well, this, I've got this soreness, but I don't have this, or I have this, I don't have that. We start to be like, yeah, I don't know. But we can tell you two things with a high likelihood. If you have no soreness, no pump, and you perceive no effort, you're probably not working hard enough. If you perceived a religious level of effort, your pump almost killed you, and your DOMS is like around 6 days later, you're probably doing too much.
Right. So and everything else is somewhere in between.
That's it. So minimum effective volume should probably be all of those at their minimum effect. MRV, when you hit it, you'll probably have to push all these close to their, like, I'm uncomfortable sorts of limits.
Right.
That's it.
Makes sense. And I think we've talked a lot about systems here as well, and that's a useful way to maybe a little more quickly get close to something. Because if you take a purely hardline data-driven approach, you might go, right, I only want to have enough data until I know when my rep PRs and my 1RM strength, depending on what your goal is, has changed. But that might take an extra 3-4 months.
Yeah.
So I think, no, this isn't a perfect system, but what it does do, it might get you there a little earlier. You might spend a couple weeks finagling things and going, oh, I didn't have that right, or I need to modify my perception, versus waiting 3 months before you have enough performance data.
Yeah, and living individuals, data collection occurs at the same time as optimization, so you can't just wait on the shit. Be like, hey, I finally know my body 10 years later, time to start training. Like,
exactly.
All right.
Yep. Great. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And one more time for the camera, this has been Anecdotes and Observations. That's
Ayo.
And we'll take that and accept it because that's what it is.
I was late.
See you guys next time.
Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.